Hi, I'm Paula Kerger, President and CEO of PBS. Obviously, when you start out, you're in a very specific place in your career, and as it evolves, your work life changes tremendously. But I would say for me, when I first came into the workforce, actually when I was in college and in business school, there weren't a lot of women in my business school class, and when I moved into my first job, there weren't as many women in leadership positions either. But as time has moved forward and it has become more and more prevalent to see women in leadership, not as many in C-suite positions yet, but hopefully that will continue to increase. I think that it has changed the dynamic. I think, speaking for me personally, and Kamala Harris made this comment when she became Vice President of the United States. Sandra Day O'Connor used to make this comment all the time, that it's not good enough to be the first. You want to make sure that you're not the last. And I think for those of us who have often found ourselves as the first in so many different categories, the first president or leader of an organization or the first manager, you feel a greater obligation, not just for the excellence of your own work, but you feel like you're carrying others with you. And so hopefully as more and more women rise into positions of prominence in the workplace, that won't be as much of an onerous burden, and each of us represent our own work and do so proudly.
I worked in television news for about 15 years. I started as a producer and then as an anchor and a reporter. And when I started in news in mid to late 90s, men were still predominantly in the lead anchor position. Whereas at that point in time, there were now women sitting next to those men on the news sets. Men still took the lead. Men still delivered the hard-hitting stories, and women very often fell into the role of the lighter news pieces. And so, there was still an evolution happening in the newsroom about the place of a female reporter, a female anchor, because again, it was still a very male-dominated industry. Through that 15 years, I did see it evolve. At the end of my news career, it was nice to see more women in the, say, investigative news scene. More women sitting on the anchor desk solo, where that wasn't happening much of the time in the 70s and 80s.
Hi, I'm Michelle Huey, founder of Women Bigger Stylish Compression Legwear. My role as the founder and CEO of Women Bigger has evolved a lot over the past 7 years that I've had the business. When I started Women Bigger, it was a side hustle for me. So I still had a full-time job and was working every single spare hour, spare weekend, spare minute on Women Bigger while still maintaining a full-time job. And after several years of that, I decided to go all in and completely focus my time and attention on Women Bigger. And so it's just really that interesting evolution that I've had as a business owner.
So I think it's really important to continually invest in yourself. So I've always sought out as much training and development as I could for myself, whether that be hiring professional coaches, going to seminars, participating in programs that make me a better leader. And that's how I evolved to get the role I have today. And how things have changed in my role since I took it on. A lot of that is transitioning from being a working manager, someone that works in their business, to someone that works on their business. And I continually have to keep myself in check about that and making sure that I'm not getting so lost in the weeds that I don't step back to see the bigger picture, allow others and empower others to step up and lead, and me step back and guide them and make sure that all the dots are connected and we're as efficient as possible.
When I started out, I was earning $90 a week. I was sharing a one-bedroom apartment with a girlfriend I'd gone to college with, so we were sharing the rent. I was making payments on a car, and I literally couldn't make ends meet. I ended up having to take a second job working at a printing company at night just to be able to pay back my college loan. I did not have enough money literally to get by. My parents weren't able to help. So it was the beginning. They didn't offer much in the way of benefits. I don't remember anything about time off. I was just glad to have the job. And for someone starting out, those kinds of things probably are not as important as they are for people who are making their way along in their careers. You begin to have a family. Time off to pay attention to your family becomes much more important than it is in the very early days of my career. But it was a time when I think people in journalism were used to just the bare minimum, and it was certainly my experience when I started out.
I think the biggest change in my career that I've seen is how maternity leave is treated differently now than when I had my children more than 20 years ago. That has gotten easier, has gotten to be a conversation that is more open, and I think there's more of a appreciation of the fact that parents, both mothers and fathers, come back to work and are able to do their job better when they have a reasonable amount of maternity leave. And so that has changed, and I'm glad to see that change.
Well, I'm a working mom with 3 children, 4 years of which I was a single mom with 2 children. So I definitely have taken advantage and understand the need for time off and flexible arrangements and benefits at a company. My new baby is 6 months old, so I just went through maternity leave. Again, I've been through 3 different forms of maternity leaves at different companies. And one thing I'm most proud of that we have at KOA is a family leave program that we put in place a couple years ago that gives 8 weeks off for mothers and fathers to spend time with their child within that first year after they are born. And having just gone through that, these past few months, it's been nice to know I can step away from my job and be home when I need to, because we truly do bring our whole selves to work. And ultimately, more than anything, I believe in flexibility. I know that I'm not just an employee from 8 to 5 and a mom the rest of the time. And I recognize that in myself, and I recognize that in my employees. And as much as we can provide flexibility for people in their lives to truly let those blend, I think the better.
The second one that I thought of in terms of professional obstacles happened in a place I didn't really expect it to happen. I try to show people what it's like to be a working parent, and that I've made decisions for that of setting office hours and things like that, so that most days when he was younger, I was able to take my son to school, pick him up, and I will push back on having meetings at times that will keep me from being at home when my son is at home. And I was talking about that at a roundtable luncheon at the National Women's Studies Association, that I didn't regularly schedule things for after 3 in the afternoon, and that those were conscious choices to balance those things. And I had a woman at the table get very angry at me and explain to me how she hadn't worked from 8 to 5 or 6 or 7 throughout her entire career so that someone like me could throw her sacrifice away. And she actually got up and left the table. And I was just flabbergasted, on a lower level of going, I mean, are you accusing me of not doing my job because I do this and then I work at night on the weekends? And then the other side for me was that a feeling for myself that we're the work that has gone before us, we have to honor it, but it also opened these doors for me to say I can be both a parent and a professor at the same time, and I don't have to sacrifice one or the other because of you being willing to make those sacrifices, and wishing that I'd had a chance to say to her that I honor those sacrifices.
I think the biggest professional challenge for me in my career was the balance between being a parent and being a professional. It is difficult. It is difficult for any full-time working parent. And I think in the news business where the hours are unpredictable, and you have to work when the news breaks, it's particularly challenging, but it is doable. And I hope that that when I talk to young people about that, when they're ready to have children, that they appreciate that it is challenging. You will feel pulled in multiple directions. And if you don't put the pressure on yourself to be perfect all the time, it can be done. But no question, it's a really tough time, and it certainly was challenging for me.
Certainly plenty of professional obstacles. I mean, it's the name of the game. It's a very competitive business. But I would say obstacles that were placed in my way because I was a woman were mainly verbal comments from colleagues. I remember when I first started as a reporter covering the Georgia State Legislature, one of the other reporters in the newsroom, I overheard him one day saying, "Well, we've hired another dumb blonde." And I just ignored it. I thought, the only way to show people is to do my job and to do it as the best way I know how. But clearly there was some prejudice against women, and those were the days when each station hired only one woman reporter. So you were there, and it was sink or swim. And you knew you were being watched and you were being judged every minute. And it was almost as if at times they were waiting for you to make a mistake. And then the time came when they would pit one woman reporter against another woman reporter. Fortunately, some of us figured that out, and we learned how to work together to support each other. But it was a very different time when there were nothing like today, when you see so many more women reporting the news, producing the news, managing newsrooms, making decisions, hiring. We still don't have enough women in those management roles, but we've certainly come a very long way. But in the early days, women were almost freakishly uncommon. And so when we did show up, it was, we weren't always treated fairly. That's why we had to stick with it and do the best we could and prove that, the naysayers were wrong.
The one that comes to mind the most has been within the past couple of years, and it has to do with this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So unfortunately, a couple years ago, there was a customer service incident with an employee at one of our franchised campgrounds, and a gun was drawn on a Black family. And this, there was a lot of heightened emotion, and this became a very big deal for our brand in a lot of ways. It was bringing to the table racism issues, it was bringing to the table gun issues, and publicly, all eyes were on how we responded to that situation. And our integrity, my personal integrity, was being called into question about what KOA stood for and represented. And I'm really proud of how we leaned into that. We tackled it head on, and reformulated our company around this belief that we've long had, but now can publicly assert forward that camping is fun and for everyone. And we truly believe that. And we've, since that incident, taken that to heart. We've stepped back and tried to learn as much as we could and listen. I personally tried to learn as much as I can about access to the outdoors and equality within the outdoors. We've done a lot of research in this space. We actually held a summit where we brought together influencers from different demographic backgrounds to talk about issues of diversity in the outdoors. And then since then, we have built a comprehensive plan that spans across our human resources functions to marketing to our franchise recruitment strategies and training that is really going to make a big statement for KOA in a big way in the DEI space. So it is a very challenging, very sensitive topic, but we're still in the throes of it, and I just feel so committed that we can do better, and we're trying to do so.
I first dreamed about being a judge when I was a prosecutor. So I would tell my younger self, keep working hard, don't give up, Accept new challenges even when they're scary, and lean in, and that the hard work will pay off. Also, take any and every opportunity for personal and professional growth. And if you work for someone or a company that doesn't support that, then it's time to look for another path.
A pearl of wisdom. What would I tell myself if I could go back to that young woman starting out in her first real career? I think I would tell her not to doubt herself, not to underestimate what she can do based on the opinions of some around her, or based on the fact that a male counterpart may have received the promotion or had the opportunity to do the big hard-hitting story. Because I think many times throughout my career, when those things would happen, I would doubt myself. Should I be doing this? Am I good enough? Am I as good, I should say, as that individual, that male counterpart? And yes, you are. I can tell myself that now. We are good enough. We are strong enough. We have worked hard enough.
When I look back on my past 25 years of work or so, I think it's definitely, I would tell my younger self I need to take care of myself. There's definitely been times in my working career where I sacrificed my health, my sleep, and my mental and physical well-being for the sake of my job. And ultimately, that doesn't make me a better worker, and it doesn't produce great work product, and it certainly doesn't make me a good leader, mom, or wife. This is still a struggle for me. This is something that I, tackle and struggle with on a regular basis as the demands of my job are high and the demands at home are high. But I have matured and realized that the more I invest in my own health and myself, I can produce better output and be a better leader and better at home as well.
I've spent most of my career in the nonprofit sector, and in working in nonprofits, the salaries tend to be a little lower, but the benefits, and particularly time off, seem to be greater. And from my perspective, that's been a tremendous gift, not only for my own personal life, but I think it's tremendously important to have time away from the office to really reflect and recharge. I often find when I'm wrestling with really critical problems that the answers to those, which may have seemed elusive, come to me when I'm away from the office. And I encourage people that work with me to take that time because I think it is so important. Oftentimes people are just concerned that if they're not in the office working as hard as they can all the time, that somehow they'll be misjudged. I don't want to comment about other workplaces, but anyone that works for me is encouraged to take the time. I think is profoundly important, and you become much more productive and creative, a member of a company, I think, if you're able to really use that time away.
When I graduated from college, the first job I had was at a biotech pharmaceutical company. And though the wages on paper were great and benefits were great, and they really touted unlimited PTO, they really didn't create the environment to allow people to take advantage of that. And they did that with just a punishing workload, and they were easily 12 plus hour days and definitely working on many weekends. And it was just part of the culture of where I worked. And when I started Vim and Vigor, I really wanted to create a culture that had a level of balance, where people came in, they loved what they did, they worked really hard, but they also had a life. And when I had, say, you have PTO, I really tried to make people take it and enforce that they take it. And I do so myself, to really share the example that it's really important that we take care of ourselves, we get the rest that we need, and we get to spend time with our family. If I were to give one piece of advice to someone entering the workforce, it's to really focus on having a growth mindset. The way I always think of an employer, especially right when you're graduating from college or right when you're entering the workforce, is that someone is paying you to learn. At this point in your career, you don't know that much. You've maybe been in school, you have maybe some part-time jobs, and you're just entering the workforce, and you have an opportunity to get paid to learn. And so when you really think about your employer in that way, it really changes how you approach yourself and your ability to grow and to learn. So that's my one piece of advice, is to be really eager to gain feedback and improve.
I would say the thing that I wish someone had told me is not to worry about not feeling that you don't know everything in the very beginning. It's okay to be learning. It's okay to ask people questions. It's okay, and there's no such thing as a dumb question, frankly. If you don't know something, ask. I think in the very beginning, I felt I was being judged all the time and felt reluctant sometimes to ask for advice. I would tell my younger self, and I do tell young journalists today, don't be afraid to ask others for advice about a story, an assignment, how to cover something, how to write a story, how to think about your career, because there are a lot of people out there who want to see you succeed. I know that I wish someone had told me early on that there were people around me who supported me and who wanted to see me do well. And I say that to young people now all the time. I don't want young people today coming into journalism to think that they're alone, and that other people are just waiting for them to fail. There's a lot more support out there for you than you realize, and just look to others for that support. And the other bit of advice I would offer is to be humble. Don't assume, just because you've worked on a story for a while that you've got it all right. Remember that you're still learning. At this stage of my career, I've been doing this for 40, 45, almost 50 years. I'm still learning. Every day I am learning something. And that's an absolutely essential part of being a reporter. You have to admit and acknowledge that you don't have all the answers.
I always use the analogy of jumping out of an airplane. Now, I'll point out quickly, I've never actually done this myself, but I have this idea that it must be tremendously exhilarating and also tremendously terrifying. And I can imagine as you stand perched to sort of lean forward and jump. One, it's something that you don't have to do. You've put yourself there. You don't get there by yourself. You have others that have helped you not only get up in the air, but also to pack your parachute and so forth. And it may be something that you never do again, but you know that you've done it. And I think for many, it must be the most exhilarating of experiences. And I think that for me is the greatest lesson in life. I think that many of us hold ourselves back because we're afraid. We're not prepared to take risk. And we grow as individuals, both personally and professionally, when we're willing to lean forward and know that, chances are you're going to land on the ground and be in all one piece. But you know that you've had the experience and it has stretched you and you've grown in many different ways.